Sam Pittman admits that his team has a quiet confidence about them and why that can be an extremely dangerous thing. He also has something to say about the depth of his team and how it compares to other teams in the SEC. And Razorback basketball gets another win, but was a little bit ugly at times. We'll break it all down on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 103.7 The Buzz and 103.7thebuzz.com. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. Hope everybody is having a wonderful Friday as we have finally made it to this point. It's always exciting anytime we get revved up for the weekend, but 22 days away from Razorback football, just a mere 3 Saturdays, and then boom, here we go. Razorback football in full swing against Cincinnati. So we are continuing to have different things to discuss, and, not only with Razorback football, but Razorback basketball too. And yesterday, we had a chance to meet with Sam Pittman and a few of the players, which, it's always good to hear from coaches and especially the assistant coaches that we don't get to hear very much from. But with Sam Pittman, it's always great just to hear from him every so often, just to kind of get an update on what the overall team is feeling. And one of the things that he said in the press conference is actually in the earliest part of the press conference that I really thought was interesting was about the team's confidence. Now, it's one thing to say you have confidence. It's one thing to show you have confidence, but to be able to have a quiet confidence, as has been described by many teams, is always something that can be a very scary and deadly thing. Take a listen from Sam Pittman as he talked about his team's confidence.
I think so. I think probably means there's more people that believe in the team. There's probably a few more, hopefully there's a few more fans and there's a few more players and all that. But yeah, I think there's a quiet confidence. That's kind of what you want when you're what you might call an underdog, or, there's a confidence of we need to show people. And that's kind of what we're about. But yeah, I feel that about our squad as well.
Of course, I guess 9-4 doesn't hurt that, does it?
Yeah. No, well, I think if you beat some teams that, maybe we've struggled in the past of doing that, or beat some teams that they beat 10, 11 years ago, whatever that may be, then I think that always helps with your confidence.
So when you think about a team's confidence and the importance that it is to have high confidence, especially when you're playing in the highest league of any league in college football, it's about being able to feel that in every game, not only do you think you have a chance of winning, but you feel like you're going to win. That's something that Razorback football has been missing for a long time, and I think last year has really set them apart, because it's one thing, again, to say it. Like, I can sit here and say all day that I have confidence in Arkansas is going to win a national championship this year, but you have to base your confidence in reality. You have to base your confidence in evidence and in stuff you've actually seen, stuff you've actually witnessed, stuff you've actually, been able to break down and look at the details and how it works. Like, those are the things that you have to put together to be able to base your confidence on. And that's why I feel like with Sam Pittman and this team, the quiet confidence that they have is legitimate, because they were able to win games last year that they normally haven't been able to win. They ended that long losing streak against Texas A&M last year in Arlington. They were able to beat them. They were able to beat LSU, who they had struggled against and hadn't beaten Ed Orgeron since he had been the head coach there. They found a way to beat Missouri, who they had struggled with during the darkest times of their football program. They beat them last year, and then they were competitive in other games too that they haven't necessarily been competitive in before, like playing like Alabama and such. So the point is that your confidence comes from something that you've accomplished, and basing it on that, suddenly the reality sets in that you can actually pull off some things that you may not have previously believed you could pull off. For instance, this upcoming year and in this upcoming season, I did that podcast and talking about Arkansas and Alabama and how that, to me, will be the biggest game in the SEC this upcoming season. And to me, will be the winner that decides who wins the SEC West. I know people can take that for whatever they want to. They can freak out about it, but that's just how I feel. But take that game, for example. And going into that game, if Arkansas is 4-0 and Bama's 4-0, both teams are top 5, put all of the hype around it and just look at it from the Arkansas Razorback football player's perspective. If Arkansas had been beaten last year 52-0 by Alabama, like they had been a few times, they probably would say they're confident, but going into that game, it's still like, man, we remember what this team did to us. We remember how we were just completely outgunned, outmatched. They still have their Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. They still have their first number 1 overall pick defensive player in Will Anderson. They still have those guys that killed us last year. It's going to be really tough. If that happened, then I would understand where a false confidence could kind of come from. But the fact that Arkansas was able to keep that game extremely close and only lose by a touchdown, and they still lost. It's the reality. They still lost. But to go on the road against a team that played in the national championship and a team that won the SEC, go into their place and lose by a mere touchdown, where for years you were getting your taint handed to you every single year. Suddenly going into this season, you look back upon last season and said, man, we were this close to beating them. We were just a touchdown away from possibly knocking off one of the best teams in the country last year. And we feel like we're an even better team this year than what we were last year. We got the pieces. We got the puzzle all put together. We just got to go out and execute. And I feel like we are good enough and confident enough to go out and beat Alabama. They base that off of evidence, not just off of what people have been telling them, but what actually happened. That's where they base their confidence off of. And it's the same thing with this Razorback football team. Confidence is something that you can falsify. You can say that you have. There's different ways to go about it. But the thing is that if you're an Arkansas football team that accomplished a lot of great things last year, that were able to rise like a phoenix from the ashes and come back out and actually be a program that was worthy of being in the SEC West, and a program and a team that nobody really wanted to play. When you accomplished that last year, everybody on this team, every coach on this staff said, hey, we know how to do this. We know how to make this work. We did it last year. We can make some little adjustments, little changes, little additions, little subtractions here and there, and boom, 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 we can be a good enough team to take that next step this year. It's based off of reality, and confidence comes from that. Sam Pittman also talked about being an underdog and where a lot of that confidence comes from. And I heard somebody say that it's hard to be an underdog if you're coming off of a great season like Arkansas did last year, where they went 9-4. How can you really say that they're an underdog? Well, it's a very simple thing. The University of Arkansas in every athletic department, every sport, the University of Arkansas in every sport will always be looked at as an underdog, no matter what. They're always going to have a chip on their shoulder because it is how they are viewed. It doesn't matter how good you did in football or in basketball or in baseball. People are constantly going to doubt you. People are constantly going to say that you're never as good as what you actually are because you're little old Arkansas. I bring that up a lot, but it's true. And so Arkansas coming off of a 9-4 football season, there is nothing about them, nothing at all, where they're going to start feeling themselves a little too much. They're going to start reading the headlines a little too much. They're going to start doing all these things that make them feel confident in themselves just because of what people are saying about them. They're constantly going to be the underdog. If you're a Razorback, you're an underdog, plain and simple. Always take it back to when Nolan Richardson won the national championship in 94. The headline in the newspaper the next day said respect, because that had been something that Nolan Richardson had been preaching about, that nobody respects Arkansas because you're Arkansas, and nobody respected him, Nolan Richardson. He had a style. He had a different way of doing things that was against the grain, if you will. And it ended up paying off, and he felt like, I don't know, some people say he maybe never got the respect that he deserved. But once you accomplish the ultimate goal of a national championship, it seems like you were given the finally the due credit and the due respect that you've deserved. It's going to be the same thing in football with Razorback football too. Sam Pittman accomplished a lot of great things last year. He did a lot of great things as a team. They were able to win some games they normally haven't won before. They were able to win 9 games, the most games they've won since 2011. Like, they were able to accomplish a lot of great things. But even going into this season, there's still a lot of doubt. There's still a lot of people out there that say, you know what? Yeah, that was cute, Arkansas, but the SEC West was down last year. I mean, LSU was not LSU, and A&M. I mean, they lost their quarterback, and there's always excuses anytime Arkansas becomes good. There's always some reason why that if they have a good season, it's because the SEC was down, because somebody got hurt, because whatever. There's always going to be an excuse for it. And so when you know that that's a reality, you're always going to be the underdog. You're always going to have a chip on your shoulder. And that's what the Razorback football team is going to have this year, regardless of what anybody says, regardless of who gets picked to do what. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder, because in a lot of people's minds last year, they felt like that was just a fluke. That wasn't just a regular season for Arkansas. That was above and beyond over accomplishing anything that they were expected to do because of external factors. That has nothing to do with their team. And we'll end the segment on this because I know we're up against it. But I'm telling you right now, folks, if the Razorbacks can just always go out with the mentality that they are the underdog and have that chip on their shoulder, similar to the people of the state of Arkansas that wear that chip on their shoulder so proudly, because everybody else outside the state constantly dogs them, constantly says how terrible a place like Arkansas is, how it's such a tiny little state with nothing good about it. You know, you leave it to the big boys, know your place, stay there and dead last and everything. You're going to wear that pride in the same way and want to accomplish great things. You don't want to shut people up, because that's honestly the best thing you can ever do when people doubt you, is to just shut them up. And so as long as the Razorbacks wear that hog on their helmet and have the name Arkansas across their jersey, people are going to doubt them. And if they wear that chip on their shoulder and they go out there and they want to perform at the highest level and shut everybody up, you're always going to have a successful mentality and a nice mentality to be able to take on anybody in the country. Arkansas football is going to have that this year. Arkansas football is going to take that on this year. And I think the quiet confidence that they have of having that chip on their shoulder is what's going to separate them this upcoming season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check on all your sports betting needs, from your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts that have you covered. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions happening today at betonline.net, where the game starts.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so continuing on with the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, Sam Pittman also had an interesting thing yesterday to say about the team's depth and how they go about practice, because if there's one thing that you never, ever, 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 ever want to have, is an injury in fall camp. Now, you don't want to have an injury ever. I get that. We all know that. But there's nothing worse than having an injury, especially a major injury in fall camp, where you don't even get a chance to make something happen. So you got to be extremely careful how to go about that. And Sam Pittman was asked about how he approaches practice and the physicality and tackling and everything. And he also went in and talked about the depth of his team as well.
I don't know what I'm going to do there yet, Tom. I really haven't decided what we're going to do exactly in the scrimmage yet. We are doing some tackling, but not against each other. Obviously, an individual, we're starting to take our teach period and turn that into half of that teach into tackling. we've got a good football team, I believe. We've got a pretty good ball club. We don't quite have the depth that some of the other programs maybe in our conference do. So I'm trying to figure out, we'll talk about it as a staff tonight and then tomorrow, trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do on Saturday. But we've never tackled in practice except for the young guys, unless it was scrimmage.
I think it's interesting that Sam Pittman talks about, in a very honest way, the depth of the team and saying that, listen, we have to approach this a certain way. We have to approach it to where we have health of our team first and foremost, and we can't really take a lot of risk that maybe some other teams can take during fall camp because of the amount of depth that they have, quality depth that they have. We got to be extremely careful. And some people heard this comment yesterday and they started kind of having a negative reaction where they're like, whoa, okay, well, whose fault is that the depth is bad? That just shows you how poor it is that if we get one injury, we're done for, where it's all over. I didn't take it that way. I took it in the way of Sam Pittman basically, again, being extremely truthful and saying, listen, we have some quality guys. We have a good football team. We do. We have guys that we put in place that we have good starters. We have a good mentality, a good culture, and all those things. But also we have an issue to where if some of those quality guys can't go or get hurt, it will have an impact on the team. Whether it's the offense and offensive line or the linebackers, whatever it is, it's going to impact us. And to me, that just again shows you that they're still working towards building depth here as a program. I mean, this is Sam Pittman's third year. He's recruited really well. They've hit the transfer portal really well. But these type of things really take time in order to build quality depth. And so I believe that if Arkansas is able to continue to just stay healthy, and even Sam Pittman feels this way, which again, he's been very honest and very upfront with everything that he's ever talked about. When he comes out and basically says, "Hey, this is how it's going to be," and if we can just make sure that we stay healthy, we're going to be a really dadgum good team. I look at the positive of that, not the negative of that. I'm not looking at it from, well, if they lose one player, then it's all over. I'm looking at it from the fact of where they're sitting at right now. They have such valuable starters, such valuable players that make the difference in making this team really good, that losing one of them would have an impact. Because it's more showing the type of quality of players that they have. And so when you're a team that's trying to take that next step like Arkansas is, and even though that they had some games last year where maybe they didn't play their best or whatever it may be, taking that next step and taking the next step forward, I think that they have all the things that they need to do so. But as a coach, I can't imagine how tough it could be to be able to, not go through tackling drills when you want to make sure your team's ready to tackle, because you just are so I wouldn't say nervous. Nervous may be the wrong word, but you're just so cautious of making sure that you keep all your players healthy. I can't imagine what that's like trying to balance those guys and balance that type of mentality as a coach, because you want to make sure your team's physical. You want to make sure your team is ready to take on SEC competition in a physical trait. Like you're waiting and trying to, put that all together. But it's tough to do when you're so concerned about making sure that everybody stays healthy. But I like the honesty. I like the honesty from Sam Pittman. And I like what he talks about when he's just like, hey, this is the reality that we live in. We got a great team, but we'll see how we approach it. We'll see how we'll go along with it over time. But as of right now, they're just trying to make sure that everybody stays upright, stays healthy. And to me, I am fine with that. Do whatever it takes. Make sure that all your best players are ready to roll come September 3rd, right? Cincinnati, first game of the season. First Saturday of September. Yeah, I'm not good with dates. We will wrap up and talk a little Razorback basketball here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Stay with us.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so Razorback basketball. They actually went and played yesterday in Barcelona, and they ended up winning. It wasn't a very good game necessarily. Like, it wasn't a blowout city from the first game, but apparently there's some weird stuff that happened in this game. Like, the team they were originally supposed to play backed out at the last minute. And so, like, they just put together some guys that were like from some professional teams there in Barcelona locally and just called them up and said, "Hey, come on down to the gym and we want to play." And it was like really a ragtag type of team. And it's like, just, you played on a basketball court that had literally, if there was ever if there was a game you could play on a wood floor, this, like, rec center or whatever it was, put tape down for it. Like, if it's basketball or badminton or foursquare or, pickleball, whatever, like, they were out there just with all the tapes all over the place. It was such a weird court, such a weird situation. The camera was terrible. Like, it was all bad, but Arkansas did get the victory. And Eric Musselman, the great coach that he is, he'll take a victory, but there are some things that he is concerned about, particularly the Razorback defense. Take a listen.
The way we started the game, not the way that we want to start games on both sides of the ball. Defensively, we have a long, long way to go. I know we don't play until November, but extremely concerned about our defense on the ball, extremely concerned about our defense awareness off the ball. It's going to be a challenge defensively. Is this team capable of guarding man to man? I don't really know. We've never played any zone defense in 7 years. But right now, simple cuts, we lose our man. So great concern for us defensively for sure.
Now, I know it was just a second exhibition game that Arkansas went through, but you got to admit, when Eric Musselman's coming out and he's saying that, hey, listen, we are concerned about this, then he has legitimate reason to be concerned about it. And I think if you watch the game, you can kind of see where he's coming from. He is extremely hard on his players, but rightfully so, trying to get them ready for that next level. And then, in the NBA, you have to play defense. Like, it's 100, like, people think that in the NBA doesn't play defense. It's not true. They play the most elite defense in the NBA. And you have to be a player that takes that next step and plays elite defense as well. So he demands a lot out of his players. But I love the fact that he's like, we've never played zone defense since I've been here, which it is pretty funny because they haven't. They haven't played zone defense because in the NBA, they don't really play zone defense. It's all man-to-man, which is the way, honestly, that it should be. Like, if you want to be an elite team, you should be able to play man-to-man defense. It's kind of like in football. If you're an elite defense, you should be able to, and if you have elite players on your defense, you should be able to play man-to-man defense a lot of times. And instead of a lot of zone, maybe throw it in to mix it up a little bit. But if you have really good cornerbacks, those guys are going to play man-to-man every single time because it's more effective if you're elite at it. It's the same thing in basketball. So Muss understands that. And I think Arkansas has the athletes and the guys to go along with it and to make it work. But it's just been, in the early part of it, not looking very good. The defense does not look very good. And you heard from Muss himself. He went through all the details of basically everything about their defense that doesn't look good. But I keep going back to this. And, I get it. Muss is concerned, and he probably would yell at me if you heard me saying this. But my whole thing is that as long as Eric Musselman is your coach, he's going to find a way to get the defense better. Like, every year he's been at Arkansas, their defense has been good. Like, last year's defense was insane. All things considered, like, they had such good defenders and guys that hustled and made every single player work for it. That's where their success came from. They didn't have the best offense, but they had one of the best defenses. This year, you can tell that the offense is definitely there, but can the defense come along with it? I think that that's a little bit more coachable. You can work harder at that. You can get better at that as the season goes on with defense more so than you can offense. That's my opinion. And so I think Muss is going to put it together. He's going to put his head down. He's going to try to figure things out. And once they get to that point where everything's going the way he wants it to be defensively, that's when this team can really take off. But yeah, it's an early part. I know it's a concern. I know it hasn't looked good, but I still feel like I have full and complete confidence in Eric Musselman to get the job done. Plain and simple. Appreciate everybody listening into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at BuzzJohnNabors for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel next Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you